Hello there and welcome back to another episode of the DIY Global Network webinar. I am Ken Hughes. I'm your host for these webinars and thank you for returning once again. I hope you all enjoyed the last few that we've been pushing out, and today is going to be no different. It's going to be fantastic. I've even worn a tie today. Look, I've dressed up for you. I think this is probably the first time I've worn a tie in a year to kind of remember how to even tie one. Hope you're all well, no matter where you are in this phase 3 lockdowns of where you are coming to us all around the world. I know we have retailers, suppliers, and people tuned into this network from all continents at all times and watching the figures. It's always great to hear the debates with you as well. So listen, today we're going to hear from a fantastic specialist in the home improvement industry. We're joined today by Reinier Zuydgeest. I hope I got his name right. He works for USP Marketing Consultancy. And USP Marketing Consultancy, they specialize in the construction, installation, and home improvement industry. It's great to hear from experts. I'm a generalist, so I talk about things kind of from the broad, whereas today we're going to get right down into the depth of consumer sentiment. So Reinier has worked with USP for 15 years. He's responsible particularly for the home improvement channel. And the great thing about the work he's going to show us today is that they do a monthly study called, let me see, I wrote it down here. It is the European Home Improvement Monitor. So every single month they measure consumer sentiment, they look at DIY expectations. And so, and because they do it every month, we're going to be able to get into the meat of what's happened in the last 12 months for the industry, and hopefully, of course, try and understand what's coming in the next 6 months and 12 months. So without further ado, let me welcome Reinier to our screens. Reinier, welcome to the DIY Global Network. How are you today?
Hi, Ken. I'm doing fine, thanks.
That's good. Where are you sheltering in lockdown at the moment?
Yeah, I'm in the office in Rotterdam, but mainly we're working from home. So I must say the office building is really quiet right now.
Yeah, you've escaped from home. And before, I always like to ask everyone when they come up on the network, DIY wise, what have you done in the last 12 months in your home? Any big projects?
Well, actually, I did some painting over the last few months inside the house, and next week we're gonna have a new floor in our living room. So that's a big one.
And is that do it yourself or do it for me? You getting someone in? Or...
That will be do it for me. Otherwise, my my wife will she will not be pleased with the end result.
Your floor will be like this. Okay, well, listen, we're going to hear from you for 30 minutes, and then we're going to have questions afterwards, obviously. So anyone who's watching this live, remember you can pop some questions in on the platform there on the right-hand side, and we'll get them through to here watching live. We'll feed them into Reinier afterwards. So Reinier, the screen is all yours, pal.
Okay, thanks, Ken. So I would like to start with a nice picture. You can see some big clouds on the left, but there's also a nice sunshine in this picture at the horizon. And I think that with the pandemic at this stage, we are now somewhere in between the big clouds and the sun. And although it's still a bit foggy in there, I hope that today's insights will give you some more clarity on what has happened last year in the home improvement industry and what to expect for this year. So I will start by explaining a bit more about our company and the home improvement research that we conduct on a monthly basis. And then we have a closer look on what the impact has been of the COVID-19 pandemic so far on the home improvement market. After that, we zoom in on the market trends and see how they are currently developing. And finally, I want to look at the future, what to expect. Today, I don't have a crystal ball with me, so I won't be able to predict the future, but I will try to put the developments that we have seen in the past year into perspective and go from there where we're going to. So a little bit about our company. USP is a market research agency, as Ken told you, specialized in construction, installation, and home improvement industry. We're working here with a team of 70 researchers and consultants, and we do all type of market researches, both B2B and B2C studies, qualitative and quantitative studies. And the majority of our work consists of ad hoc researches, but we also offer monitor studies like the European Home Improvement Monitor. Our head office is located in the Netherlands, and we also have subsidiaries in Germany and in Croatia. And we conduct researches all over the globe, but our main focus is in the European market. So I started the European Home Improvement Monitor 8 years ago to monitor the 3 key trends in our market, being digitalization and the impact it has on the consumer journey, the rise of e-commerce, and the shift from do-it-yourself towards do-it-for-me. Trends that everyone was expecting to happen 8 years ago, but no one really knew the pace in which it would develop across the various countries and the various product categories. The research is done in 11 European countries, and we track more than 100 products. During the start of the pandemic, our subscribers of the monitor had a lot of questions related to the effect of the pandemic on consumer DIY behavior. And therefore, we had some sort of spin-off of the research. This is the research you see on the slide below. An additional consumer research on the impact of COVID-19 on home improvement. And today I'll share the insights from both these studies with you. All insights from the monitor are available for various product categories. As I mentioned, we research more than 100 products, but we report them into 20 summarized product categories, which you can see on this slide. But because our time is limited today, I will share the insights mainly on a general level for this presentation. In the report and in the study that we do, at each buyer of a specific product category, we ask 9 questions related to their customer journey. We ask how they orientated themselves on the product, who decided for the product and brand, the purchase channel that was used, and how the product was applied. On top of that, we have a theme topic each quarter. And for the Q1 report of this year, the focus will be on the theme sustainability. We look at how consumers are taking sustainability aspects into consideration during their selection processes for a home improvement product. Now let's move on to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, what it had on our market. I think it's safe to say that everyone who is attending today is aware of the headlines we saw last year about a booming home improvement market. But is it really that booming? I think it depends on how you define the market, but I'll tell you some more about that later. And the second question is, how long will it last? Especially now with the store closures in several European countries, the booming months for home improvement seem to be over. But what will happen if stores are allowed to open again? Will we still be on that high level as we saw last year, or will that change? But before we look into the future, let's first have a look at the situation of last year. In March, April, just like all sectors, the corona crisis impacted the home improvement market strongly. Many DIY stores had to close for a while. Consumer confidence dropped enormously in March, and it's still not at the level that we had in the years before in Europe. And third, the professionals had less work in the residential market due to the fact that consumers were not comfortable for months to have contractors or installers entering their houses unless this was absolutely necessary to them. So these 3 developments would normally result in big losses for the DIY stores, which did happen initially in the first 2 months of the pandemic in most countries. But soon the home improvement market recovered and was actually a booming market. In this slide, you see the financial results of Kingfisher. There's a dramatic drop for Kingfisher in Q1, but they recover strongly in all other months of 2020. Their full year results will be published next month, but I expect it will be a positive end results, seeing the Q2 and Q3 results already. And not only Kingfisher is showing great results, also the French DIY retailers were growing double digits since May. And German DIY stores also had a very positive year and grew with almost 14% in 2020. So what were the main reasons for the booming DIY business? Why did this happen? Well, it required 3 things. First, people had more time. We have done various studies in the past among consumers on the question why they would postpone their renovation projects and maintenance. And they frequently mentioned a lack of time as the most important reason to postpone their jobs. As governmental restrictions took away a lot of possibilities to spend time outside your house, they now all of a sudden found themselves some extra time at home. And this leads to more DIY. Second, they were not spending money on holidays or restaurants, so they saved more money for other things like home improvement. The national governments in Europe financially supported businesses, so most people were able to keep their job. And even though some people are facing serious financial difficulties, in general, the total savings per household were higher than before. So the majority of the people, they're not financially impacted by this pandemic for now. Third, home improvement became a necessity instead of a want. Now let's take a closer look at this by looking at some facts from the Home Improvement Monitor. We see that almost all Europeans are indicating to spend more time at home. The first bar on the left side is about May. Then 8 is August, November, and the last measurement was January of this year. And you can see that in May last year, 90% of the consumers indicated to spend more time at home due to the coronavirus. Well, this went down to 78% in August, but unfortunately, during our last measurement in January, it was back at 88% again, which is a high level of consumers claiming to be spending more time at home. And looking at these results by countries, we can see there's not that much difference between the countries. Although Southern European countries, Italy and Spain, even have percentages above 90%, but looking all over the countries, it's above 80% everywhere. So situation is more or less the same for consumers. So the second reason for the booming market is clear. Lots of activities were cancelled and people saved money to spend on their home. And the third one, working from home, that created a need for a better workspace. In March, April, people were working at the kitchen table. They didn't realize that this would last for so long. But when they did realize that, they needed better workplaces. So a lot of home improvement projects was driven by this need for a nice home office. We also see in our data that the attic was the room with the highest increase in renovations in 2020, as the attic is typically a room that people has transformed to their home office. Also, by spending more time at home, people became more aware of their interior and noticed more possible home improvements. They got fed up with the color on the wall, which led to a big increase for the paint categories. However, this does not seem to be a temporary thing, as our research shows that last month, 23% of the consumers claim to have done more home improvement jobs in the past 3 months than normal, with only 12% saying the opposite. This is a similar level of increased home improvements as we saw in the first months of the pandemic, in May, for instance. So the consumer need for home improvement is still at the same high level, but it is the question if this demand can be fulfilled right now. Since a lot of stores are closed, the consumers probably can only do like the small, minor home improvement jobs right now. And here we do see differences between the countries. In Poland, there are more consumers who are doing less home improvement jobs, while in the Netherlands, 30% claims to have done more home improvement projects than normal in the past 3 months. Also, between age groups, the differences are big. It's the millennials who are especially peaking in the number of home improvement jobs that they do, more than the other age groups. And if we zoom in on the type of jobs that are being done, we can see that it's mainly small decorative jobs, like painting or wallpapering. It even seems that the larger renovation projects are being postponed at the moment. So it's not all positive. If we look at the do-it-for-me part of the market, we see that still half of the European population does not feel comfortable with having a professional working at their home. This group rather postpone their renovation projects until the virus is not a threat anymore. So you can see on a European level, it's 50-50. And also here we see differences per country. In Denmark and the Netherlands, the majority feels comfortable to invite a professional to their home, while in Italy, Germany, and Poland, consumers are a bit more cautious. So basically, there are two ways to look at the market. From a retailer point of view, we see a booming market, looking at the financial results of the big DIY chains. However, in our monitor, we look from a consumer perspective. The benefit of this is that it includes all purchase channels that consumers use. All online stores are included in these numbers. So also items that are purchased via Chinese platforms like Alibaba, but also the local specialized stores, the hypermarkets and the discounters that sell DIY products are included in here. But more important is that from a consumer perspective and the spending from a consumer perspective, also labor is included. And yeah, labor is a big part of the total spendings, especially when it comes to the larger renovation projects. For instance, if someone wants to renew their bathroom and have a complete bathroom renovation, about 50% of their costs are labor costs. So they have a huge impact on the total spending that consumers do on home improvement. And when we're looking from this consumer perspective, what we do in the home improvement monitor, we actually measure a decline in spending on home improvement, a decline of 1.5% overall. And that is just caused by a lower share of do-it-for-me projects in the total projects that are done, and therefore lower spending on labor. So this is in contrast to the DIY stores that are showing strong growth in the most European countries. So to answer the question, how true is the explosive growth? It depends on how you look at it. From a retailer perspective, it has. But from a total market perspective, from a consumer point of view, it hasn't. Now let's have a look at the key trends in the market and how they have developed in 2020. As said, the total number of home improvement jobs that were done in a larger share were DIY jobs. This is in contrast with the trends that we saw from 2015 till 2018. I gave many presentations about that in the past. The explanations were that the aging society in Europe, people were not able to do DIY jobs themselves, and also the lack of interest from millennials, the new generation. They were not interested in DIY. They didn't have the skills to do the job themselves. So everyone was expecting that the market will move towards a more do-it-for-me market. And actually it was developing, although it was developing very slowly, because an aging society, that's not happening in 1 year time. That's a long-term development. But it was in fact going to a do-it-for-me market, but this has changed dramatically last year, as we've seen much more do-it-yourself jobs. Nevertheless, I think that even though there's a clear break of the trend right now, the aging society in Europe will continue, and therefore I think it's just a temporary change of direction, and I expect the upcoming years the share of do-it-for-me will continue to increase again. Online buying, another trend that we were watching. Online buying throughout the years was slowly but steadily growing over the years, and DIY retailers already set up their online businesses in a good way over the years. But in 2020, their e-commerce operations really had a stress test from the market with the store closures. The online channel became the #1 priority for them, and online businesses expanded and improved by that. So we see that in 2020 it made a great leap forward. In 2020 it went towards 12% of the total home improvement purchases that were done online, and the year before that it was at 8%. So huge growth. Also here we see big differences between countries. In Germany and the UK, the online share of the home improvement markets are the highest. And these markets are ahead of the other European countries when it comes to e-commerce. The most suitable categories for DIY are electrical products like power tools or security cameras. And the products in the categories building materials and chemicals are more often traditionally sold via physical stores. However, also in these categories, things are changing. I zoomed in on the towel adhesives product category. And if we look at that, the share of online purchases was always somewhere between 3 and 5% throughout the years. While last year, the share of online purchases in towel adhesives grew towards 10%. So this means that now also the more unusual categories like towel adhesives are adapted online. And this is not only for the buying part, but also the online orientation. There we see a similar pattern. Almost half of the consumers that have purchased towel adhesives last year has orientated online on the product before they purchased it. So also when they purchased it in a physical store, in a DIY store, a lot of these buyers already orientated on the product online. If you look at decorative products in the decorative category, like paint, consumers prefer to see the color in the store and make their selection for paint there. You have this nice color walls in all the DIY stores, and yeah, they think they can make a better decision there. However, also for a category like paint, the online orientation is growing. And a significant amount of paint buyers orientate online before they go to the store. And we see a similar pattern in each of the countries. And this is affecting the moment of brand selection, because when consumers orientate on paint online, there's a good chance they already decide for paint brands during their online journey, even if they buy the paint in a physical store in the end. So we see a strong relation between the increased online orientation and deciding for the brand at an early stage. In Denmark, Poland, and UK, 4 out of 10 consumers already decided what paint brand to buy before they enter the store. Nevertheless, also in these countries, the majority still decides for the brand while being in the store. So to never underestimate the power of the store when it comes to brand selection for consumers. And as we've already seen, millennials have increased the number of home improvement jobs the most. So they're becoming more important target group for the DIY retailers and the suppliers. So yeah, let's have a look at how to resonate to the millennials in an effective way. And what I think is a great example for this is a paint brand called Backdrop. Backdrop is a small startup in the US and understands how to be appealing to millennials very well, although they describe their target group as digitally oriented people. But they do tick a lot of boxes for the millennials as well. One of the keys to their success is that they simplify the process. They don't offer 3,000 colors. They just offer a limited assortment and present them in an attractive way. For the color of red, they only have 6 colors of red to choose from. They're not descriptive by their color names, but they create emotional, heroic names. For example, lipstick on the mirror is a color for red, or surf camp for a blue color. Besides limiting the color choice, they do not let their customers search for the right brushes and rollers to use for the paint. They're simply selling them a paint supply kit with everything they need for the job. So simplifying the process for them. Backdrop uses different ways of showing their products, and they use storytelling, explaining to their customer that it is more than just give your wall a color. It is about setting the stage in your living room where a big part of your life takes place. So that's taking it to a higher level. Millennials are the most socially active group. So of course, there's also a social sharing functionality built in the website, but also on the social media, where the millennials can share their projects, their end results, which they're proud of and is of course nice input for the backdrop website as well. They're also making efforts to create a community around the brand. They're doing this by selling painter t-shirts called wet paint, which are quite popular among their customers who are more or less also fans of the brand. And they show their social responsibility by donating part of their turnover to non-profit organizations, as it needs to be about more than just selling products for the millennials. It's also about caring about your environment. And of course, the reviews are important to the millennials as well, to get trust in this brand for buying the product. So what do the developments and the market trends and the impact that the pandemic had on the home improvement market mean for the future? Well, as the market became less predictable last year, I was frequently asked, how long will the booming market last? Will it all disappear once we go back to normal? As said, I cannot do crystal balling, and there are no hard figures on this available, but I like to share my thoughts with you on this. So from what we have learned last year, this should be the case. When people are spending more time at home and work from home, they will spend more time on thinking about home improvement projects and end up doing more home improvement projects. I'm convinced that most people with a full-time office job will not return for 5 days a week in an office building. There will probably be a hybrid form, working from home for a couple of days and working at the office for some days. And this means that people will structurally spend more time at home than before the pandemic. Most national governments do not expect that everything will be back to normal before summer. And this means that there will be limitations during the holiday period, also in this year. And therefore, it's fair to expect that again, consumers will save money and have more budget available for more home improvement. And third, a significant part of the consumers have been postponing their larger renovation projects. And therefore, we expect to have a higher demand for these type of jobs when the countries are opening up again and people feel more safe to invite professionals to their home. However, not everything is the same as last year, so we cannot make a one-on-one comparison with that. New mutations of the virus can occur and would probably lead to faster and stricter lockdowns from governments. And stricter lockdowns like we currently have in Germany leads to stores being closed, and the market potential from a consumer demand cannot be realized. Before the start of the pandemic, there was already a labor shortage in the construction market throughout Europe. And if the demand to outsource large renovation projects rises in the residential market, this request might not be fulfilled because there simply are not enough professionals to do the jobs. And after a year with a lot of DIY jobs, consumers might be a bit fed up also with doing the jobs themselves. So this can be a barrier for further growth of the home improvement market. So as you can see, there are still a lot of uncertain factors in the market. And right now, probably no one can predict how the market will develop. But we did ask the consumers about their plans for home improvement and whether or not they are more enthusiastic about DIY than before, in order to have an indication on future growth of the market. So we asked 2 questions in order to make this estimation on what they're going to do. First one is if they are expecting to do more home improvement jobs in the next 3 months. So looking at their plans for the next 3 months, they're slightly positive, even though 2/3 expect to do a normal amount of home improvement jobs. So at least it seems that they're not done with their homes yet, which is, I think, the good news. It will remain at more or less the same level. The second question we asked was about their expected total spending on home improvement in 2021 compared to last year. And what is striking is the large group that expects to spend more, even though they are not planning to do more home improvement in the next 3 months. So this means that either they're doing the same amount of projects, but more expensive and larger projects, or that in short term, they are still postponing projects, but do have big plans for later this year. Either way, this is positive news, especially in Poland, Spain, and Italy. The consumers expect to spend much more. Also for 2021, we see that the group with the most positive expectations on spending are the millennials. But again, there's a big barrier, as almost half of the consumers does not feel comfortable visiting a DIY store right now and is trying to avoid public spaces at the moment. So this needs to change in order to fulfill the potential that there is. Only in Denmark and France, more than 60% of the consumers felt comfortable visiting a DIY store last month. So a further slump in the share of do-it-for-me jobs could decrease the growth in the home improvement market if the red or the orange line will continue going down like this. That will have a big impact on the spending, because the more constructive jobs are more often outsourced, and these are larger jobs where a lot of spending is done. As a final look, some facts on how the Corona crisis impacted DIY behavior and attitude of consumers. We've been asking consumers a couple of statements on this, and I think the first two ones are very interesting to look at. The first statement was, "I enjoy doing home improvement more than I did before." In January of this year, 39% of the European consumers agreed to this statement. So they are enjoying home improvement more than before. And this is strongly related to their skills. If you're doing more home improvement, you get more experience and your skills obviously improve. So 37% of the consumers in Europe say their DIY skills has improved a lot in the past months. So that's a positive thing. And we see that throughout all the countries. So what does it all mean for the future? Well, there still is a high willingness to do more home improvement jobs, especially among millennials, which is encouraging, as this generation was not that familiar with DIY before and does not always have the money to outsource their projects. At least now they are more enthusiastic about home improvement. Second, as working from home starts to become the norm, consumers will remain to have more focus on their homes, which should lead to additional home improvement jobs. There will be a slow shift from decorative to more constructive jobs, as a lot of these jobs has been postponed so far. Fourth, if the infection rate increases, the DIY behavior will remain strong. We saw that last year already, in stark contrast with the B2B side of business, which suffers if there will be more infections. With lower expenditure on summer holidays, more budget is available for home improvement. The upcoming holiday season will have its limitations as well. More pressure on increasing the sustainability and energy efficiency of residential housing will create more demand for this. I haven't spoken a lot about this topic today, but perhaps this is something I can share at a later presentation when the Q1 report on sustainability is available. And money is still relatively cheap. Interest rates are low, and consumers therefore will be more willing to lend money for their renovation projects. But there are also some negative arguments to take in consideration. It could be that consumers will be fed up with home improvement projects and they rather spend their time on other activities, although we do not see signals for that right now. It can be the case later on this year. Also, as a vaccine is looming, consumers might be spending less time at home again, so spending less on home improvement. And last but not least, we expect that consumers will catch up on larger renovation projects, which have been postponed so far. These projects are mainly outsourced to professionals, which can be good for DIY stores too, especially for the DIY stores that sell a lot to professionals. Nevertheless, as the majority of professionals, they purchase their products via building merchants, it will have the most impact on this channel. But there is an opportunity here for the DIY retailers that are now already offering installation services to their customers. Because when the larger renovation projects peak, consumers will have a hard time to find a reliable professional to do the job for them. So DIY stores can solve this problem for consumers when their installation services are well organized and operating on full capacity. So I think there's a big opportunity there. When the market opens up again for the DIY retail. So far, my update on the market. For the people who are watching this live, you will now have the opportunity to ask questions. And for the people who are watching this presentation on demand, please feel free to reach out to me via email or by phone if you have any questions on this. For now, thanks for watching, and let's go back to Ken.
Excellent. Thank you, Reinier. You're a brave man for putting your phone number there out on to the world. But yeah, that's great because a lot of people do watch this on demand, so it's fantastic. Yeah, we have a good few questions. One of the ones I want to start off with, I found that fascinating. So your samples around over 2,000 a month across all the countries, I guess, across all those 11 countries. I can't get my head around why that one of the last stats you said there, 15% of people said they were going to do more DIY jobs this year. And a good 70% said the same, and then some less. How can I'm trying to get my head around what are the other 85% doing? So, I mean, because we're in wave 3 in Europe, and this is predominantly a European study, I really don't understand why that figure isn't higher. Have you any kind of stories underneath the data that explains why people, they have so much money in their bank accounts right now? We know savings are in the billions, trillions globally. It's not being spent, as you said, on travel. It's not being spent on other things. Why is that 15% figure so small?
Yeah, I'm surprised about that too. But the question was how we asked it in the research, if they're going to do more. So it's not if they're going to do anything. Yeah. There's also a big part who are saying, okay, we're going to do the same amount as normal. We're not going to do now more because there's a corona pandemic. That puts it a bit in perspective.
Okay, yeah, I guess so. And one of the charts you showed at the very beginning was the consumer confidence chart, which is really interesting. So where we were pre-pandemic, obviously we have a complete collapse, and you see consumer confidence come back. Is that your measure of consumer confidence, or is that a European measure of consumer confidence?
Oh, that's a European measure of consumer confidence.
Yeah, because again, it's one of those things. How do we measure confidence? And right now, the uncertainty is so strong with everybody. We just don't know. I mean, my opinion is that we have so much money spent being held in accounts. I understand that people can't do the big projects that they might want to do because they don't want tradespeople on site. As you said, your chart showed kind of a 50-50 split there, kind of half people willing enough to have people on site, the other half not. But I do wonder, is 2022 going to be a huge year for DIY? What's your opinion on that? So let's assume, praise God, everybody, that the end of this thing comes this year. Do you think that the money that people have in their accounts, and this is just a crystal ball question, will be diverted into those big projects, build the conservatory, redo the whole kitchen, lay all the floor, the big ones, or will they spend them on experiences like travel and luxury, indulgent experiences, and not in their homes? What do you think?
I think first of all, there's a lot of uncertainty among people, and these are scary times, and therefore I think they're a bit cautious with spending money at the moment, and that's why we see that the savings are up. The big question is, once the signal is given by governments that is safe again and we can do everything we like, I expect right at that moment people will start doing other stuff, and there will be a small dip in spending on home improvement, but not for long. I think that people are creatures of habit, and I saw a recent study from Simon Cougar that was about what are you going to do when you are able to travel again? Are you going to travel much more or and make up for it? They called these revenge travelers. But only 10% of the consumers indicated themselves as revenge travelers. They were really planning to do much more traveling when it's possible again. 50% said, I'm going to do the same as amount of traveling as before, because we're creatures of habit. We're going to have the same holiday over and over again. And 40% said we're going to have more domestic traveling because we feel that's safer.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean,
if not, if they're not spending, if only 10% is planning to expend much more on traveling, I think there will be the money will not be spent more there. And I'm not sure about the restaurants when they open up again. I think you would like to go out for dinner also, just as I do. But
yeah.
I'm not sure if there are things like revenge eaters, if they're gonna go to a restaurant 5 times a week, when in the past they were only going once a week. I think they will also start going once a week again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, I mean, it is a crystal ball question because we
Yeah.
really don't know how that money will be spent. I think the people's relationship with their home, though, I mean, as a social scientist, which is kind of my lens of looking at the world, that definitely has changed. So their relationship with home is in some senses more positive because of obviously all the time we spend here, lots of nesting behaviors, lots of increased appreciation of my home and how I live and how lucky I am to have this building, this garden, this balcony, this whatever. And at the same time, there's a negative experience, obviously, with home, which is to do with I've been trapped in it now for so long. I'm calling this the anything but home kind of urge that we might have in the short term, definitely a very short term thing about everything wanting to be outdoor experiences and away from home. I'm going to pick up on something just to move on because there's a question here about millennials. And I'll paraphrase it because it's long, but you meant in your study, you were talking about the millennials picking up that DIY torch a bit more than they maybe had been before. Traditionally, we would have looked at millennials as a very renting generation. We would have said, they're a generation that like to access things instead of own them. So, why own a car when you can have an Uber? Why have a holiday home when you can have an Airbnb? And also, why own a home and burden yourself with debt when you can rent? So traditionally, we've always seen them as a renting generation, but of course, they've got much older and they're now in their 40s, and things have changed. So do you think you touched on a few parts in your presentation about that millennial generation, that they seem to be turning towards more DIY than do it for me? What's your opinion on that generation, how they're going to drive the shape of the DIY industry for the next 10 years?
Yeah. Well, sure, this generation looks at things in a different way, but I think there are also a lot of similarities with the previous generations. And maybe it doesn't make sense to own a car if you live in a city and you have swap cars available. But when it comes to housing, I think it's more of a necessity that they rent. It's not necessarily that they prefer that. I think their dreams are the same as previous generations. They still want to raise a family and own a home. But it has been difficult for them in the past 10 years with house prices being that high, and the possibilities that they have with mortgages were limited. So I think it's more of a necessity than really a preference by them.
Okay, yeah, fair point. Okay, I'm going to lean forward here and read my screen a little bit because I can't read it because I need glasses. Reinier, question for you. Do your findings apply to the garden market as well? So the kind of stuff that you're seeing in for home improvement, have you any vision? I know you're in that particular niche, mind you, in terms of garden and outdoors and the trends there. Similar trends are different, or anyone else in your organization looking at garden?
Yeah, we just did a study actually on the trends in the garden market, but this was more of a one-off study to see what they are doing. We don't have the comparison with previous year, but we see that there is a high attention for the garden just as for the home at the moment.
Okay, yeah, just about. And another question, this is where you all get to see how effective my Botox is when I have to lean forward. Do you know more about the profile of the new entrants to the category over COVID period and what jobs and types they're doing? Thank you for the great presentation from Reinier. So a question about the profile of the new entrants to the category, people who are coming into the category for the first time, maybe because of COVID. Do we have any idea of who they are?
Yeah, I think these are mainly the youngsters. If I look at the data, there's really a peak among these millennials, and they're starting with the easy jobs. They pick up the brush and decided to paint their wall, and one job leads to another.
Okay. I mean, I worry about the industry. Let's take even retail store design. You mentioned the what was it, Backdrop, the brand there earlier on, the paint brand. I worry about our. My father was a very handy guy, very good with his hands, very DIY. He passed those skills on to me. And sometimes I walk around a DIY store and I see it as it's so functional, so product led, not experience led, so impersonal. It's you have to kind of really know what you're looking for often. I don't find it extremely shopper friendly. It's all the things that the millennial generation don't want. So you mentioned that Backdrop. I was looking at that. So from an experiential point of view, they have it right. They have a really good brand personality. They've got their building community, real authentic, all values that the millennial generation hold really dear. Do you think that the DIY industry is ready for what the millennials expect of it, or do you think we're behind the curve?
I think there's a lot to learn there. If you look at this paint example, for instance, yeah, it's a very small company, but they're doing it in the right way. If they were a big company, these millennials were not going to the store anymore. They would just be a fan for paint, like they are a fan of the Apple brand. And I often had this discussion with my customers. They're saying, we're in products, we cannot create fans of our products. And now I actually see a paint brand doing that, and it's not like the market leaders who are doing this. So I think they should really look at these type of developments and learn from that, because I agree with you. The experience is not always great when you go to a DIY store, although I see some positive developments there as well with some DIY retailers who are offering more experience and more inspiration in their stores.
Yeah, and particularly on digital too, as obviously digital ramps up within DIY, I find the digital platforms of, let's say, retailers quite two-dimensional, very unexperiential, and that's the mistake, because the people who are maybe going into the store may still be the older customer, but the younger customer certainly would probably do an initial search or browse online, want to buy online, and those platforms I think need to be a little bit improved. Another question in here from Louis Lee. Hi Louis, how are you? If economy freezes, usually the big DIY projects and the big investments are the ones postponed until the situation improves. Not sure if the vaccine will translate into more DIY projects if the economy ever does recover. So it's a comment in terms of, so yes, I mean, no one's talking about the global recession and the impact that might have on these big project spends. So are people holding their money? Are they really actually holding their money just because they're so uncertain about this global recession, about employment, about the future? Can we draw a straight line between when this is over, everyone's vaccinated, they'll spend that money on DIY, or will they not, because they actually still don't know whether they'll have a job in 2022?
Yeah, the economic impact of this pandemic is difficult. I mean, I see a lot of industries who are doing very well at the moment, and they're not supported anymore by the government, by government funds. So also among our customers who are mainly active in the construction industry, they're doing quite good. So the people who work there, they keep their jobs, keep their income. So that will continue, but a lot of money has been spent by governments, billions, and at some point this has to be paid back. But yeah, how will this be done? I mean, probably we should work for always. That's the conclusion then. But I don't think that will when the pandemic ends, that we will have a very negative economic development, which would lead to less big home improvement projects. I think actually the opposite.
Okay. Yeah, you're an optimist. I think I'd share your optimism. I think I would. I think people, when they come out, I think the power of wanting our lives back will outweigh the concern about my employment. I think people will want that back. But you're right, we have to pay the loans back at some point. I don't know who's going to do that when. Fairy has a question. Thank you, Reinier, for your inspirational presentation. Do you have insights on how millennials experience the DIY skills offered via YouTube? For example, what percentage of them do accomplish a task once demonstrated on YouTube? Yeah. Have you dipped your toe into asking those people how they're learning their skills, how they want to? They may not have taken them from their parents. They may be. This is obviously a YouTube generation, definitely. Any research on social media consumption pre-store visit or usage of social media to inform their purchase decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. We did that in previous team topics in the home improvement monitor as well. And as you said, YouTube is very important for people who want to learn their new skills. But what really was striking, that the millennials were again the most enthusiastic group, not only about doing home improvement, but also about learning new skills. And they want to learn that in many different ways. They want to engage in workshops from DIY retailers. They want to see videos on YouTube or take a course or something. They're open to anything, but they're more willing than we think they are.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I have a guy I know on social media I follow here. He's renovating an old period property at the moment. He isn't a millennial. He's probably a young Gen Xer. He's on the edge between millennial and Gen X. But he has, I think, over 100,000 followers on Instagram watching him renovate his home. He's a very nice. He's quite charismatic. He's quite funny. But it's property pornography. You know, people do consume what people are doing at their homes, and it's kind of a collision of Pinterest boards and actual skills. And so it is a wonderful space actually to explore. And again, if we talk about the experiential part, giving people experiences, that social media experience pre-store is really a place I think where retailers and brands need to really up their game, because I don't see any of that from the DIY industry stepping into that space. I'm going to guess your backdrop people probably do it. They probably have their influencers and they're probably in those social communities talking, building networks. I think we need to do a lot more of that. Digital.
Yeah, I agree. I know an example here in the Netherlands as well. This is a guy who is a self-employed plumber. I think he's 40 years old, and he's filming everything that he's doing and posting that on social media. Yeah. And he's becoming increasingly popular because the guy's very funny. And if I look what the DIY retailers are posting on YouTube, for instance, it's very good from instruction point of view. But there's not a lot of fun and entertainment around it. And I think, this plumber who's self-employed and who just doing this as a joke, now has a platform of 100,000 people following him. That's interesting to watch and also to make use of, I think, as a brand or a DIY retailer.
Absolutely. I think when we talk about digital transformation, I think a lot of people hear those words and they just think of channels. They think of a e-commerce website, but that's so wrong. I mean, digital is a philosophy, and digital and social media, and ultimately digital just gives us better connections with our consumers. And so we need to really invest in what those digital connections can be. And often, they are social media. Okay, look, it's been great chatting to you. I mean, in fact, that live, that your point there on the entertainment value part of it, I think also in a DIY store, to me, it's not a very experiential, entertaining store visit. It's very functional. And a lot of the product communications and from brands can often be very functional and not for. And we had Pascal on for our Pascal Coupons. He works for the Nextworks group, and she specializes in China. And he was talking on this webinar back in January. It was just last month, about the live streaming in China, and that so car dealers using live streaming, that celebrity endorsement, the live streaming part, that's part of the consumption of the pre-purchase journey for a customer these days. I think, as like all trends, they sweep from China across the world. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that live streaming, that collision of entertainment and retail, basically. And I think it fits perfectly into the Gen Z, the millennial piece. Okay, so one last question I'm going to ask you before I let you, because we're running out of time. Crystal ball question: if you were to estimate what we're going to do this year or next year for the DIY channel, are you optimistic or pessimistic?
That's a difficult one. I see now numbers in countries where DIY stores are closed of -40, -50%. So then and if that continues, it is now continuing in February. So we'll have more or less the same numbers there. If it will continue in March and April as well, then you have 4 months with -50%. I think there's no way that we can make up for that in the rest of the year. Okay. So You really have to.
What about e-commerce and click and collect? How much of that gets picked up when the store is closed? How much of the any idea of how much stuff gets picked up with the e-commerce instead?
Yeah, it's limited. As said, in the Netherlands we had minus 46 for DIY stores in January when we were fully closed, and the only option was ordering online and click and collect. So you see that we're losing half of the market then.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not, yeah. And that you showed a Kingfisher chart earlier on where you had their e-commerce level, you saw the massive surge, and then the settle back. What was interesting is the settle back is, significantly higher than they were. So even though we're not making the gap closed from, obviously when the store closes physically, we lose a chunk, but the e-commerce level is clearly going to stay with us for a long, long time. And so the game has certainly changed. Reinier, it's been a pleasure having you, pal. Thank you so much for your time, for the presentation. We've had loads of questions, probably a lot more interaction than we've had in the past, actually. And so you obviously hit home with the data and with the inspirational presentation. So really, thanks so much. We've pushed all that out on the global network already. It's there to download and there to share. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And for the information.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. For the rest of you looking, thank you so much again for your for joining us live here on the Global DIY Network. If you're watching this on demand, you missed out on your opportunity to ask questions, but there you go. You can always, as Reinier said, chase him on email and me on social media also. A quick heads up on what's coming our way. So the next event that we have on the Global DIY Summit is on the 10th of March. So that's only about 2 weeks away. Yeah, 2 weeks away. So this is one I'm really interested in. This is Katrina and Pauline are going to join us from Factor A. They are an agency specializing in Amazon vendors. So if you've ever wondered what the might of Amazon might do to your business, to your brand, and to retail, in fact, the title of the webinar is really exciting. It's how to represent your brand on Amazon to influence your physical retail store success. So just because you go on Amazon doesn't mean it all falls away from the store. So that's going to be a really interesting session, 10th of March. Tune in to make sure you look at that one. And then after that, we have John Herbert, CEO interviews continuing. They're fantastic, talking to the CEOs of all the DIY companies all around the world. We've had them from South Africa and from Australia and from Europe, and it really gives us great insight into what the CEOs of the organizations think themselves. Next one's on the 31st of March, and that's with Matthias Ankerberg and he's the CEO of Big Max Group, which of course is in Sweden. And so again, tune in for that one as well. For the rest of you all, I hope you all stay safe, stay well. I will see you back for that webinar on the 10th of March. I'm going to go out in my garden now, and I'm going to play with my DIY delivery that I got yesterday of 2 bales of concrete blocks, 3 bags of mortar, and 3 tons of soil. I think we should start a little competition on the DIY network platform of DIY jobs we're all doing ourselves at home. Anyway, until next time, I'm Ken Hughes. See you then.